Hello, and welcome back to the Game Room for the very last episode of 2020, a year I didn't think we'd ever get through. The year 2000 was the PlayStation's graduation party. It not only proved itself worthy of success and being succeeded by new hardware, but it was celebrated by damn near every developer in Sony's wheelhouse. More games were released for the PlayStation in 2000 than in the entire life cycle of the American Sega Saturn. It's insane. Normally, when I do these videos, I discuss honorable mentions and bring up small trinkets of info, but there's just no time for that. The list of games scrolling on screen were all finalists for the honorable mentions and trinkets, and that was after already slashing a literal page of other games from the list. As usual, if this is your first time joining the channel, know my personal bias is not part of the decision, nor are these lists the possible best games released that year. My lists focus on games that alluded to the future of the hobby, kept pushing the medium forward as well, and eureka moments that shape publishing decisions. With that out of the way, let's get this party started. At number 10, Shooter Starfighter Sandvine. Imagine the year 2000 as a bus leaving its stop, and just before it can gain full steam, cries of "Stop, wait for me!" echo out throughout the air. The bus stops, and while at first passengers would likely be annoyed, their annoyance would soon fade away as the newcomer showed its worth. That's Starfighter Sandvine in a nutshell. A budget title released under H-Tech's A1 Games lineup, literally before 2001 was rang in. Unlike other budget titles whose worth may not be recognized on the first try, Sandvine punches the player right in the face with its merits. A fast-moving, hyper-timed arcade shooter with an addictive level progression mechanic, it proved budget releases were not to be snickered at. More companies would continue the $10 to $20 releases heading into 2001, offering gamers an earlier access to affordable gaming rather than wait for the greatest hits lineup. Its success was a teaser of things to come. Budget titles would soon pave their way onto mobile devices and become a major aisle in online digital storefronts. Flanked by cheaper AAA title prices and companies continuing to empty their vaults of fantastic games, Starfighter Sandvine was the Trojan horse of the PlayStation's discounted twilight years. At number 9, International Super Soccer Pro Evolution. I know, sports games, right? Remember when you had choices for those sports games? Well, you can thank Konami for continuing one of the longest-running rivalries in PlayStation history with ISS Pro Evolution. A system-exclusive and enhanced version of their soccer engine, Pro Evolution provided crazy details in the player editor, allowed the saving of replays to memory cards, and more fan-favorite options. 20 years later, the Pro Evolution vs. EA Sports FIFA rivalry is still going strong, but more importantly, the player's right to having a choice is still going strong, which can't be said for most other sports genres. At number 8, Crash Bash. Sony's swan song in the mascot department was no real surprise to those paying attention at the time. After proving they could go toe-to-toe with Mario in the action games, as well as the kart racing games, Crash Bandicoot gets the minigame compilation. A party game that is clearly going after Mario Party, Crash Bash was Sony's proclamation that none of Nintendo's franchises was free from competition. As the years went on, and both Sony and Microsoft consistently offered alternatives to Nintendo's vault of games, you began to see the big N fade away from direct competition. With the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox quietly silencing the GameCube, Nintendo would be forced to continue from a successful gimmick approach, rather than a software one. Crash Bash may not have been the vanguard of the console war's destruction, but it was definitely one last successful nip at Nintendo's heels. At number 7, Gundam Battle Assault. Having an anime game in the 2000 top 10 list may seem weird, but bear with me. It was established in 1997 that anime games are here to stay with Ghost in the Shell and so forth, but Gundam's importance is twofold. From the technical standpoint, its an ingenious workaround to sprite graphic limitations is a sight to behold. Rather than create single giant frames of animation, the mechs are composed of many small sprites animated together. This trick allowed for insanely huge on-screen characters being able to show damage in real time as well. The more important factor lies under the hood, though. Bandai of America completely changed the game to help play into the then insanely popular Gundam Wing success in the USA. An entire roster of original in-game characters were replaced with more popular known anime ones. Parts of the in-game story were removed or modified, and other modifications to play into the Western world's newfound mech addictions were made. Anime may have gotten its foothold in 1997, but here in 2000, Bandai discovered just how far they were willing to go to make sure their import titles could succeed. At number 6, Spyro, Year of the Dragon. If you couldn't tell by now, this year's list is heavy on symbolism and foreshadowing. 2000 was more than just a transition to new hardware. It was a last call for many of the most beloved series played on original tech. Spyro Year of the Dragon was the mascot send-off that most systems could only dream of. While Crash was now resigned to other spin-offs and Medieval 2 would only push its hero into slight obscurity, Spyro 3 cemented the Little Dragon That Could's legacy. Fantastic level designs, along with finely tuned mechanics, allowed the entire series to make a comeback full circle as a greatest hits set and a collector's edition set. 20 years later, and 3 remasters, Spyro, Crash, and Sir Daniel are all still providing smiles and hours of entertainment for the gaming masses. In Spyro's case, that includes other forms of plastic as well. Number 5, Driver 2. Probably the biggest surprise on this list, and one of the most amusing. In its original time frame, Driver 2 was met with mixed reviews and more curiosity than the following. That said, with a simple change in the game's play mechanics, it started an in-game rivalry and an all-new race to the top of open-world console video games. The mechanic in question? Tanner could now literally get out of his car to steal another car. Just like in Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto series. While the comparison was rightfully and obviously made at the time 20 years ago, there was a more pressing angle. Driver 2's visuals blew Grand Theft Autos out of the water. Its 4 large cities, realistic cars, and close-to-the-ground camera angle would beat Rockstar's GTA 3 offering by a year, and that required a whole different platform. This comparison would stick all the way into the PlayStation 2 era, with each other's games featuring an unflattering visual joke of the other. As the PlayStation 2 finally came into its own, the developers were well aware of Infogram's Throne Gauntlet and all hell broke loose. Console developers finally began to embrace the open sandbox world concept, and the rest, as they say, is console history. At number 4, SpiderMan. Activision is no stranger to the top 10 list, and in 2000 they had 2 surprise hits. Comic book licensed games were almost always a miss, with the rare exceptions here and there. Spider-Man's first solo run on the PlayStation proved that in the right hands, with just the right amount of fan service, could shatter the myth completely. Great level designs, incredible amounts of featured characters, and cameos including Stan Lee himself, and quirky missions gave way to a great gameplay experience. With their follow-up Enter Electro and the fan-favorite Spider-Man PS2 edition, Activision and their developers proved comic book games, and to a further degree, licensed games, need no longer be reskins of already existing games, but their own amazing experiences. See what I did there? At number 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. The second and third games for 2000 share a similar trait that got them this far into the list. Simplicity. Meaning all it took was a simple addition for them to completely change how we look at a game's evolution. After making the most important game of 1999, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater returns with the usual upgrades and modifications, but it was the simplest of controller motions that shot the sequel into the stratosphere. Pressing up and then down, or the opposite, caused the in-game skater to perform a manual, a move that allowed gamers to sequence in another trick set without breaking their score counter. This tiny little addition completely blew open the game's new level sets, allowing casual gamers and hardcore Pro Skater fans to experiment, grind, and spin like they never could in the original. It would end up launching the license into one of the most beloved franchises in history. Despite its sad end of life cycle with number 5, the rest of the library features hours of amazing skateboarding gameplay across all different types of skating. And all it took was a 2-button press. Number 2, Alien Resurrection. If there was ever a game too far ahead of its time yet way behind its lifespan, it was Alien Resurrection. Based on the movie it's named after, the game was released 4 years after the film had already left theaters. It was and is a very different type of game, focusing more on the haunting silence of the corridors and figuring out how to best outwit the alien hordes. It's here on the list because it was the first game to offer the now standard dual analog stick configuration of having the left stick move you and the right stick be your camera view. Sadly, this wasn't a successful launch of the concept, as some folks, famously, just couldn't wrap their heads around it. When Time Splitters released a few weeks later, following in Resurrection's footsteps, the new control scheme was finally accepted by a wider audience. 20 years later, and it's still the standard controller layout for every game system released. All right, number one spot. Finally, and blessedly, is our grand prize winner and most important game of 2000. If you've made it this far and have been screaming names at the screen wondering where some of those games were, now you know. The number one game for 2000 is the RPG. I have often said that the PlayStation was the golden era for the Japanese role-playing game, and no other year underscores that than the system's fifth. 20 titles, some of them the genre's very cornerstones, came barreling through retailers at an unheard speed and quality and quantity. Every company even remotely tied to the genre rang in the year with contributions. Quirky gamers found solace in Rhapsody, a musical adventure, and Persona 2. Older folk continued their journeys with Final Fantasy IX and Breath of Fire 4, and the truly old school took to the remaster of Lunar 2, Eternal Blue Complete. Newcomers made even bigger waves, with Valkyrie Profile, Chrono Cross, and Sony's amazing Legend of Dragoon setting their respective legacies in motion. Every subcategory was covered too. Front Mission carried strategy gamers, Dragon Valor took up the action RPG mantle, Darkstone allowed budget-minded players a chance at the fun, while creators could put their money where their mouth was with their own adventures in the intimidating but deep RPG maker. To put this into a better perspective, realize these games were just part of over 250 titles published that year. Literally 1/5 of the system's total library all launched in a single calendar year, and almost 10% of that were role-playing games. Absolutely outstanding. And with that, the sun settles on another year of the original PlayStation. Despite the amount of games and the insane quality that went along with them, it was by no means the end of the system. The hardware would populate the second stage another 4 years thanks to backwards compatibility of the PlayStation 2 and the previously discussed budget titles. Did you guys have a favorite game of 2000? Share it in the comments below and let's get the conversation started. Game-Rave TV and site updates will resume in 2021 as I use these last few days of 2020 to catch up on things and just consume more Christmas cookies. So many cookies. I love it. Be safe, wear a mask, vaccine if and when you can, and play some games. I will see all of you guys next year. Let's do it.